During the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, liberal MSNBC pundit Stephanie Ruhle teamed up with Maher to stage an intervention of sorts for conservative columnist of the New York Times, Bret Stephens, who is a critic of Donald Trump, but can't quite bring himself yet to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. And along the way, they address the hypocrisy coming from MAGA, who demand that Democrats tone down their rhetoric, while all the while Donald Trump uses the most divisive and incendiary rhetoric in modern politics. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. This most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher was a bit different in the sense that it didn't have a strident Trump supporter to be the foil for the group, but they did have Bret Stephens. Now, Bret Stephens is a very famous New York Times columnist. He's very smart, very principled in his own way. He gets on my nerves a lot because, of course, as a conservative, I feel like he is too generous to the Republican Party even now, and he grades the Democratic Party very harshly by comparison. However, to give the devil his due, he's always been a critic of Donald Trump. He was never a supporter of Trump. The moment that Trump stepped into the political arena in 2015, Bret Stephens was a vocal critic of Trump, recognizing him as an ideologically inconsistent, unprincipled, malignant narcissist. So he's been very consistent on that. But for some reason, he still can't quite bring himself to commit to voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. And so I want to play a couple of clips where Maher and Stephanie Ruhle, who is hilarious, by the way, liberal MSNBC pundit, they basically try to stage an intervention for him.
I feel like you're the dog we're trying to get in the car to go to the vet. You know?
Ouch. We're going to put that cone on your head for the rest of the day.
I say that as one of your biggest fans. You know, I mean, I gobble up everything you write. I just don't understand how you get to this place. But okay, let's not badger.
But do you know, for the last 2 weeks, I've been going on and on. Like, I can't figure out where informed undecided voters are. I'm like, who's the person who has a list on their refrigerator of like, well, she said this and I'm like, who is this person? And then I opened the New York Times 3 days ago and it's you.
It's pretty funny. And it's also true. I'm sorry. It's one of those things where, and I made this case before, obviously people who are on the left, people who are, liberals, progressives, social democrats, democratic socialists, even communists, anybody who is not a conservative, they have, as far as I'm concerned, if you're an eligible voter in the United States and you're anything left of center, you have a moral obligation, in my opinion, to vote for the Democrats, particularly when a fascist like Donald Trump is the alternative. And a vote for a third party or abstaining from voting is only going to increase Donald Trump's chances of taking back the White House and also enabling conservatives to take control of the Senate. They already control the House. They already control the Supreme Court. It would be a disaster if the Republicans are left in control of any of the branches of government. And I'm happy to make that case. I believe that's where we are. But I've also tried to make the case that even if you're a principled conservative, like you believe in fiscal responsibility, small government, whatever that means, a strong national defense, you still have an obligation, or in my opinion, or rather I should say, it's much more rational to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not a conservative. He's just really not. I mean, so Donald Trump blew up the deficit. He deficit spent all 4 years in office, even prior to COVID. Some people try to excuse or hand wave his profligacy because of COVID spending. But the fact of the matter is, even when Donald Trump came into office, he inherited a really good economy from President Obama, and he still spent. He deficit spent his first year, his second year, his third year, his fourth year. And it got worse, obviously, under COVID. But even if you control for COVID, Donald Trump effectively spent twice as much as President Biden and the Biden administration. So even by conservative standards, he's just fiscally irresponsible. To say nothing of the fact that he's not a patriot. Right, this is a man who has demanded presidential immunity, effectively placing him above the law. He has rhetorically and diplomatically bent the knee to foreign dictators and autocrats like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. Everything that Donald Trump, in terms of policy, with the exception of tax cuts for the rich and packing the federal judiciary with young conservative justices or judges, everything flies in the face of what conservatives say that they stand for. So somebody like Bret Stephens, as far as I'm concerned, he has no good argument to abstain from voting for Vice President Kamala Harris, even if he disagrees with her on policy, because at the very least, She's also not an insurrectionist. She will also observe the peaceful transfer of power. And as Liz Cheney says, Republicans can survive 4 or even 8 years of quote unquote bad policy, if that's what you think the Democrats are capable of. But can the country, including conservatives, survive a second Trump administration? The fact that the chance that we don't is greater than zero, in my opinion, is enough to end the argument. So I want to play some other clips as well from a lengthier exchange between Maher and Ruhle and Bret Stephens when it comes to the topic of rhetoric. So one of the things that we've heard here lately in the aftermath of the second attempt on Donald Trump's life is that Democrats are somehow responsible for this because of their quote unquote incendiary rhetoric, because they correctly described Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. And so I want to play some segments of an exchange between Stephens and Ruhle and Maher, because Stephens takes the position that even if it's true, Democrats and the media should not call Donald Trump a threat to democracy, because he thinks like in terms of outcome, all it does is aid him. Even if it's true, we should abstain from referring to him as a threat to democracy because all it's going to do is benefit him.
He got shot at again, and he says, their rhetoric is causing me to be shot at.
Of course, he's absolutely right that we probably should tone it down when we're calling our opponents the end of democracy, the end of Western civilization. We're not helping our arguments.
I disagree. That's a dumb argument, I think, because what? No, that's their argument, which is that you guys are saying Trump is a threat to democracy. But he is a threat to democracy. The answer can't be that we can't say what's true.
Every time the left calls Trump a threat to democracy, Americans remember that in 2016, guys like me were calling Trump a threat to democracy. And here we are.
You don't stop calling out the truth because people aren't listening, right? When Donald Trump tells lie after lie, you don't say, well, nobody seems to care. It's our job in the media, right? When people complain, Donald Trump got fact-checked way more than Kamala Harris did. You're damn right he did. You know why? He told more lies.
I have thoughts on this. Couple of things. Number one, I like the fact that Bret Stephens is optimistic about the vice president's chances of victory. So am I, but it's nice to see a conservative also reiterate that. I hope he is correct and that the vice president will win the election. But what's interesting is, and I'm actually kind of surprised because, again, Stephens he presents himself as a principled conservative. But what I hear effectively is don't tell the truth because the truth is politically inconvenient. And telling the truth about Donald Trump will only inflame support of him. And what's interesting about that is you could make an argument, like for sheer utilitarian purposes, that, you omit certain details when they are politically inexpedient. The fact of the matter is that political rhetoric, political messaging, propaganda, political correspondence on the right or the left, everywhere, by definition, you editorialize, right? Because you're not going to tell all the truth. Like, you're not going to say everything. You're not going to utter every fact, right? You're going to choose to focus on some things compared to others. The right does it, the left does it, everybody does it. But what's interesting is the same guy who says, hey, even if this is true, don't talk about it because it's going to make the situation worse. It's only going to increase the likelihood that Donald Trump, wins, is also the same guy who says he can't bring himself to vote yet. He says he's open to it, but he's not there yet. That he can't bring himself at the moment to commit to voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. But why? Right. So presumably it's because he thinks that it would undermine his conservative beliefs. But note it, like it's almost like he's saying he's willing to sacrifice or undermine his conservative beliefs about, truth telling and saying the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is, because it might help Trump. But he won't vote for Vice President Kamala Harris because it undermines his conservative principles. It seems to be like mutually exclusive. So, OK, here you'll walk away from or kind of undermine the conservative principle of truth telling because it's politically inconvenient. But here you won't, kind of step away from your conservative principle to vote for a Democrat. But that's also politically inconvenient because that also helps Trump. You see what I'm saying? Plus, I think that by normalizing Trump, which I think is the unfortunate effect of or the unfortunate consequence of what Bret Stephens is suggesting, is only going to make things worse. Trump benefits from this idea that he's treated normally, right? Like, Bret Stephens can say that the media treats Trump abnormally, and at times they have, and rightly so, as Maher and Stephanie Ruhle point out. But the problem is kind of the whiplash. We call him an existential threat to democracy, but then in so many other ways, we treat him as though he's just a regular politician. I think it's that dissonance which has confused so many Americans and made it permissible socially and politically for so many Americans to support him. Oh, okay, you say he's a threat to democracy, but CNN will have him on, do a town hall, shake his hand, smile, laugh at his jokes, not ask him about that time he tried to insurrect the government, all of those things. To me, that's where the fodder is created for Trump to have that sort of enduring appeal. As far as I'm concerned, I'm with Maher and Ruhle on this. Donald Trump is outside the political norms, should be outside the political norms based on things he's said, based on things he's done, based on things he's promised he would do if he becomes president again. And I'm sorry, but I think that should carry a reputational, social, and political consequence. I think you should be punished politically, socially, and reputationally. Obviously, political violence is unacceptable. He should never have been shot at, but he should lose elections, every damn election. He should be treated like the pariah he is socially and reputationally. And his supporters, his prominent MAGA Republican politician supporters, people who know better, people who are supposed to be leaders and representatives, they should also accrue, in my opinion, a social, political, and reputational cost. They should also lose their jobs. They should also lose their elections. They should also be stigmatized and mocked and belittled for putting partisan politics above love of country. And to the extent you could make the argument that this helps Trump, I don't see it. But even if so, this situation, the truth is so damn important that it would be crazy for us to normalize Trump in this way. So again, really good episode. You should watch the full thing. I expect that in the end, Bret Stephens will vote for the vice president because I think despite my enormous disagreements with him, he's not stupid enough, in my opinion, or unprincipled enough to just sit this one out, especially when he has no real reason to. So great episode. Let me know what you think in the comments.